All right. Today we're diving into Hezbollah,
Okay.
trying to get to the heart of it,
Yeah.
trying to understand the ideology that drives this complex organization. And
Right.
you've sent over some excerpts from their Wikipedia page on the topic.
Very interesting stuff.
So let's unpack it together and see what we can learn about what makes Hezbollah tick.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we hear about it all the time, especially in the context of a conflict with Israel.
Yeah.
But to really understand like their motivations, you have to kind of understand the beliefs that are shaping those actions.
Totally. It's like trying to understand a painting by just looking at like the brush strokes
Right.
instead of the whole picture.
Exactly.
So where do we even begin with this?
Well, I mean, the Wikipedia excerpts actually do a good job of giving the historical context.
Okay.
Imagine Lebanon in the 1980s.
Oh, yeah.
A nation grappling with civil war.
Right.
Various factions vying for power.
Yeah.
Hezbollah emerges from this really chaotic backdrop.
And their ideology is heavily influenced by what was happening in Iran at the time, right?
Solely.
The Iranian Revolution.
The Iranian Revolution had just happened.
Yeah.
And, Ayatollah Khomeini, the leader of the revolution,
Yeah.
he becomes a sort of ideological godfather to Hezbollah.
Oh, wow.
And it's very evident in their 1985 manifesto, the Hezbollah program,
Okay.
which explicitly states, their allegiance to Khomeini's vision of an Islamic republic.
So they weren't just like concerned with Lebanon. They saw themselves as part of a broader movement?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the program outlines some pretty ambitious goals. Expelling Western influence from
Yeah.
Lebanon.
Right.
Establishing Islamic governance
Yeah.
and, aligning with other Islamic movements globally.
Wow.
It even goes so far as to call Israel the vanguard of the United States in our Islamic world.
That's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
Like they're not
Yeah.
they're not mincing words there.
No.
They see themselves as warriors in this
Totally.
conflict.
Yeah, and that's, I think, where the theological dimension of their ideology comes into play.
Okay.
They viewed this conflict with Israel not just as like a political dispute over land,
Right.
but as a divinely ordained battle,
Oh, wow.
deeply rooted in Islamic history and scripture.
So for Hezbollah, this wasn't just about like land or politics. It
Right.
was about fulfilling what they saw as God's will.
Exactly. And that makes the conflict much more intractable.
Oh, absolutely.
Because how do you compromise
Right.
with what you believe to be God's will?
Yeah, that's not
Yeah,
that's a tough one.
it's a tough one to reconcile.
Yeah, so we've got this group.
Yeah,
They're drawing inspiration from Iran.
right.
They're committed to this struggle against Israel as they see it.
Yeah,
But then things start to shift as we move into the 1990s, right?
they do.
Like,
Well, this is where I think we start to see Hezbollah's pragmatism emerge a little bit.
okay.
They realize that to survive and thrive
Yeah.
in Lebanon's very complex political landscape,
Right.
they needed to adapt.
Yeah, you can't just be a revolutionary movement forever.
Exactly.
You have to engage with like what's happening on the ground.
Precisely. This period is often called Hezbollah's Lebanonization,
Okay.
where they shift toward a more multi-confessional approach,
Interesting.
engaging in Lebanese politics,
Okay.
even forming alliances with groups they had, fundamental disagreements with.
So they were willing to work with non-Islamic groups.
They were.
Them potentially groups that had completely antithetical ideologies.
Yeah. I mean, there's a quote in one of the excerpts about them finding common ground even with Marxists
Really?
during this time,
Wow.
which, highlights that while their core beliefs remained rooted in Shiite Islam,
Right.
they were willing to be flexible to achieve their objectives.
That's a pretty remarkable shift.
It is.
It makes you wonder how much of this was like a genuine change of heart
Right.
versus like a calculated political strategy.
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
Right. And it's one I think we're going to continue to grapple with as we explore more about Hezbollah's evolution
Okay.
and the complexities of their ideology.
Yeah.
But one thing is for sure.
What's that?
This period of Lebanonization really demonstrates their ability to adapt and evolve,
Right.
which is, I think, crucial to understanding their resilience
Yeah.
and their continued influence in the region.
So they're evolving, becoming more like a political force within Lebanon.
Right.
But this whole thing with Israel, that hasn't gone away.
Mm.
Like, have they softened their stance at all?
No, their commitment to armed resistance against Israel is still a cornerstone of their ideology.
Okay.
And this is where it gets really complex.
Okay.
Because their view of this conflict it's not just a political thing for them. It's
Oh.
deeply intertwined with their religious beliefs.
Yeah. So they see it as more than just a political or a territorial dispute.
Much more, the excerpts you sent over actually highlight their belief that God cursed the Jews,
Wow.
making this conflict, part of a larger cosmic struggle.
Okay, so for them, Israel's existence is illegitimate.
They frame it as inherently illegitimate, and that belief is what justifies their fight in theological terms.
So like any talk of compromise or like a two-state solution, that's just off the table.
It's tough because their rhetoric, it's interesting.
Okay.
On the one hand, their 1985 manifesto calls for the obliteration of Israel.
Right.
But then as time goes on, you see instances where they suggest the possibility of accepting a Palestinian state
Okay.
alongside Israel.
So they're leaving the door open a crack.
Yeah, but always with this idea of resistance.
Okay.
They point to Israel's withdrawal from Lebanon in 2000
Right.
as proof that resistance works.
Okay.
But at the same time, they're highlighting the continued occupation of Sheba farms
Okay.
as justification for ongoing hostilities.
So it seems like they're playing a long game here.
Yeah.
Using a combination of military force and political maneuvering to try to achieve their goals.
Yeah, I mean, there's a statement from Nasrallah
Yeah.
in 2000
Okay.
where he refers to Israel as being more fragile than a spiderweb.
He really said that.
He did.
Wow. Okay, so what was he getting at with that?
Well, it speaks to this belief that Israel, despite its military strength,
Right.
is inherently weak because of what they perceive as this dependence on Western values
Okay.
and a fear of casualties.
So they think if they just keep the pressure on,
Exactly.
Israel will eventually crumble.
That's the belief.
That's kind of a scary thought.
It is.
Okay, so what about Judaism as a religion?
Right.
Do they equate that with Zionism or is it separate?
Well, this is where things get really murky.
How so?
You've got statements from Nasrallah
Yeah.
and other Hezbollah representatives
Right.
explicitly denouncing anti-Semitism,
Okay.
trying to draw a clear distinction. They say things like, our problem is not with Jews, but with the occupiers of our land.
Right. But there's another side to this,
There is.
isn't there?
The Wikipedia excerpts also cite numerous examples of anti-Semitic rhetoric
Okay.
and actions that are attributed to Hezbollah.
Like what?
You see accusations of Jewish world domination conspiracies,
Wow.
comparisons of Jews to apes and pigs, even praise for Holocaust deniers.
Oh my God.
So
It's really hard to square those two things.
yeah,
Because on the one hand, they're saying they're not anti-Semitic.
right,
But then on the other hand, you have all of this evidence that suggests that they are.
exactly.
So which is it?
It's a question with no easy answers.
Yeah.
Some analysts say that this condemnation of anti-Semitism is just strategic
Okay.
to soften their image in the West,
Right.
but then they still appeal to their base with this more radical message.
Right. Or is it possible that they're trying to separate their struggle against Israel from any hatred towards Jews as a people?
It's possible, but it's hard to say.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're trying to have it both ways,
Right.
which speaks to the inherent contradictions within their ideology.
Yeah.
They need to maintain this image as a legitimate political actor on the world stage. But they also need to appeal to their base,
Yeah.
who are fueled by this belief in the righteousness of their struggle against Israel,
Okay.
even if it includes this inflammatory rhetoric.
It's a tough nut to crack.
It is.
Okay, well, what about their relationship with the West then?
Right.
Specifically the U.S.?
Well, they're not fans of U.S. foreign policy,
I mean,
to say the least.
yeah, how could they be?
They see the U.S. as an extension of Israel,
Right.
a malevolent force that props up what they see as an illegitimate state
Okay.
and seeks to undermine Islamic movements in the region.
So the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing.
In a way.
Okay.
And their media portrays the U.S. as like the root of all evil in the Middle East,
Wow.
responsible for propping up dictators,
Right.
fueling instability.
Yeah. The Wikipedia page even mentions that there were attacks on Western targets
Yes.
that were attributed to Hezbollah.
Right.
And then there's that whole thing with the Statue of Liberty depicted as like a bloodthirsty ghoul on their Almanar TV station.
It's really jarring imagery,
It is.
but it's designed to demonize the West
Yeah.
and present them as this existential threat,
Yeah.
which reinforces their narrative of resistance
Right.
and justifies their actions to their supporters.
So we've got this group.
Yeah,
They're suspicious of the West.
right.
They view Israel as an enemy.
Right.
And they justify their actions through this mix of religion and political strategy.
Yeah. It's a lot.
It's a lot to unpack.
Okay, so where do we go from here?
Well, the article goes on to talk about their stance on women's rights.
Wait, really?
That seems completely at odds with everything we just talked about.
It does seem that way.
They're fighting a holy war, they're engaging in all this political maneuvering,
Yeah.
and now they're advocating for women's rights.
That's what they claim, at least within their own organization.
Okay, well, tell me more about that.
Let's dive into that.
So we ended on this, like, really unexpected thing with Hezbollah and women's rights.
Yeah, it's not something you'd typically associate with them.
Not at all. So tell me more about this. Like, how do they even square that with everything else?
Well, the Wikipedia article, it actually highlights a few interesting points.
Okay.
They say that women hold leadership roles within the organization, that they participate actively in elections.
So is it not just, like, for show?
It doesn't seem to be. They've made some effort, at least, to promote women within their ranks. For example, they have female members on their Shura Council.
And that's like
It's their highest decision-making body.
Oh, wow.
And there's this really interesting figure named Rima Fakhri,
Okay.
who's tasked with, like, interpreting Islamic feminism
Islamic feminism.
within the framework of Sharia law.
Okay, so that's a whole other layer to this.
It is.
How is that different from secular feminism?
Well, broadly speaking, Islamic feminism, it seeks to achieve women's rights and equality,
Okay.
but it does it within the framework of Islamic principles.
So they're not saying, like, religion is the problem.
Right. It's more about reinterpreting it.
Okay, but how much can you reinterpret when it comes to something as established as Sharia law?
That's the million-dollar question,
Mhm.
and it's where the complexities really become clear. Because
Okay.
interpretations of Islamic feminism vary widely.
Oh, I bet.
And there are these ongoing debates within the movement itself about what constitutes true equality.
So where does Hezbollah fall on that spectrum?
Well, their version, while it advocates for things like women's education and political participation,
Okay.
it still operates within the bounds of their specific interpretation of Sharia law.
Which, given their conservative background, is probably pretty limited.
Yeah, it's definitely not about challenging traditional gender roles in a broader societal sense.
Right.
It's more about empowering women within the existing framework of their ideology.
So is it genuine equality, or is it just a way to, like, make themselves look more moderate?
It's hard to say for sure, and I think it's a question open to interpretation.
It's definitely a different side to them, though.
It is. It shows that they're not just this one-dimensional militant group.
Right, they're fighting a holy war. Right. They're playing politics,
Right.
and they're also talking about women's empowerment.
All within this very specific ideological framework.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is. And it gets even more complicated when you bring in their involvement in the Syrian civil war.
Right, because they're fighting alongside Assad.
They are. And it really highlights the sectarian tensions that they're navigating.
So they're fighting against ISIS,
Right.
which on the surface seems like it aligns with the West's interests.
Right. But then you have to consider their rhetoric.
What do you mean?
Well, the Wikipedia excerpts talk about their use of the term takfiris to label their opponents.
Takfiris. Now, what was that again?
It basically refers to Muslims who accuse other Muslims of apostasy, of abandoning the faith.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a very loaded term, and it's often used by extremist groups to justify violence.
So is Hezbollah using it that way to paint all of their opponents as extremists?
It's possible that there's a strategic element to it.
Right.
They present themselves as this bulwark against extremism.
But at the same time...
Their involvement in Syria is also about consolidating Shiite power, protecting their supply lines from Iran,
Right.
advancing their own agenda.
So it's really hard to say what their true motivations are.
It is, and their use of the term takfiri, it could be seen as a way to demonize Sunni groups more broadly,
Right.
which just exacerbates those sectarian tensions that have been around for centuries.
It's a good reminder that these conflicts are never simple.
Never. There are always multiple layers, competing narratives.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in all of that.
It really is, and that's why I think these deep dives are so important.
I agree.
We take the time to peel back the layers,
Right.
to examine the complexities,
Yeah.
and hopefully come away with a better understanding.
And I think we've done that today.
I hope so.
We've learned so much about Hezbollah's ideology.
It's a lot to process.
It's this mix of religious fervor,
Right.
anti-Western sentiment,
Yeah.
a belief in armed resistance.
And they're masters of strategy.
Right.
They adapt to the circumstances, but they never lose sight of their goals.
It's like they're always playing this long game.
Exactly. And understanding their ideology It's key to making sense of not just their actions,
But the whole situation in the Middle East.
precisely because this isn't just about one group,
Right, it's about a region that's struggling with sectarianism.
right? Political instability,
The legacy of colonialism.
all of it.
Yeah.
And Hezbollah is both a product of those forces and a contributor to them.
So where do we go from here?
Well, that's the question, isn't it?
It is?
We have to keep asking the tough questions.
Like what?
Like how much of Hezbollah's ideology is rooted in genuine religious belief versus calculated political strategy?
Okay.
And how do their actions impact the lives of ordinary people caught in the crossfire?
Those are really important questions.
They are, and they have no easy answers.
But we have to keep asking them.
We do.
Yeah.
Because by engaging with these questions,
Yeah.
by trying to understand,
Yeah.
we can start to navigate these complexities and work towards a more peaceful future.
I think that's a great place to leave it.
I agree.